In this episode, we're going to discuss the 100-piece rule. Now, I've talked about this in other episodes, and I know people aren't agreeing with me. So we really need to dive down deeper and discuss this 100-piece rule when you first release your product. Let's take a look at the main reasons why I suggest that you should just make 100 pieces out the gate before going into mass production. There's two main reasons. One, and that is it's easier to fix 100 pieces than it is to fix 1,000 or 10,000 if there's something that you missed in your design. Now, in the previous episodes, we talked about your prototype and how your prototype is supposed to be your finished product and not some proof of concept. I know that's a little different than what you guys are used to hearing, but the truth is, prototypes are actually what you use to figure out your manufacturing. So you need to get your prototype 99% there before going into manufacturing. It really will help you once you start mass producing, I promise you. So back to the manufacturing aspect of this. When you first invent your product and have built your prototype, you're going to only want to make 100 pieces out the gate. Now, I've discussed this before. If you don't believe me, that's what Apple Computer did. Look at their history. The Apple I was only 100 pieces originally, and they handmade each of them. That's how the trillion-dollar Apple Computer Company got started. So if it's good enough for them, why isn't it good enough for us? So let's suppose that you have a product that you're going to sell for $100. And in order to get that 2.5 times price, you have to make at least 1,000 pieces. Well, that basically means that the product is going to cost you somewhere around $40, let's say. Well, that's $40 times 1,000, or $40,000 that you need to come up with to make 1,000 pieces. What if the company can make, let's say, 100 pieces at $90 a piece? Well, now you only have a $9,000 investment on the first 100 pieces. Your risk is a lot lower. But you're going to say to me, but the 2.5 times rule doesn't work anymore. Now, I realize that if you sell that first 100 right away, that you're only going to make $10 a piece or $1,000. But here's the catch. Your risk was much lower, and you can then go and buy 1,000 pieces with literally no risk. You already know that they're starting to sell, and even if it takes you a little extra time to sell the additional 1,000 pieces, your risk was so low that you're home free. But let's say something happens that you don't want to hear. Let's say you invested in that 1,000 pieces at $40 a piece or $40,000, and it takes you forever to sell, or they don't sell at all. You've just lost $40,000. Look at it this way. The only person that's really interested in your product at this point is you. Nobody else knows about your product. Nobody else is as excited about your product as you. And you haven't even started marketing. This could take you months and months and months to get going. So $40,000 is tied up. And that is really risky. But if you do it my way, you only have $9,000 tied up. Yes, you're only going to make $10 a unit, but who cares? Your risk is much lower. So I don't understand this emotional attachment that you guys get to your inventions. I guess because I've been doing it a long time, that feeling has gone away. But you need to look at the product as an ends to a means. It's just something that's going to make you a living, whether it's a full-time job or a part-time job. You also have to look at it objectively and remember that just because you have a good product doesn't mean it's going to sell. There's a million other factors that go into this that make your product either a success or, unfortunately, a failure. So you need to reduce your risk in the beginning so that you can be successful. But more importantly, you're going to want to be able to have enough money to go on to your next invention. So let's take a real world example of this and look at it a little further. Because one of the viewers has asked me a question that fits right into this topic. Gonzalo from Chile asked, "Thanks for all the information. It's very valuable to us. I am running a startup and we are developing a medical simulator to train healthcare skills. Now we are struggling on how to manufacture runs of 50 or 100 units of plastic parts. We know with injection molds, at least we have to make 1,000, but it's a hard decision since we haven't launched yet to market, and probably the parts will have to be changed after their early adopters use it. You know, this is an interesting question, and I had to think about it for a little bit to come up with a good answer. We've talked about this in our injection mold videos about how the actual cost with plastic parts is the mold itself. Gonzalo, I actually have a couple of suggestions for you here because I've done this, so I am familiar with it. The first suggestion is look at your mold itself. We haven't gotten into this discussion yet about the number of cavities that you can put within a single mold. If you want to mass produce a product, you generally put a few of the same part in one mold. But in Gonzalo's case, this may not be the way to go in the beginning, especially if he's planning on making changes. If it's a small enough product, he should go for what's called a mold insert, which is basically a block of aluminum that slides into a pre-made metal housing that then inserts into the mold, and it saves you in cost because you're only making part of the mold or the cavity. The rest of it is external, that is just basically a mount for the mold making machine. And it does save you quite a bit of money. So if you go for the insert, put one part in it, maybe two if you can fit two of the same part in the mold. Yes, it's going to take them more time to run each of them, but in the beginning we don't care about that. We want to get our cost as low as possible. There's another thing about mold making companies, and that is 100 to 200 pieces is actually a standard prototype run. So you don't need to tell them that you're going to be using the test run as the actual product. Now, hopefully everything will come out okay when they send you those 100 to 200 pieces, but you just tell them that's part of your initial test run. Think about this. You're actually telling the truth here, because when I say we're taking 100 pieces and making them as a final product, that is a test run. We're testing the market. We're making sure the first 100 customers get the product and are testing it for us so that all the bugs are worked out, because believe me, you can sometimes miss things, especially with firmware type devices, electronic devices where they have software internally. Sometimes there's things that come up in the real world that you just didn't plan for. So by making 100 pieces, it's easy to make those changes. Even if you have to get those 100 back and manually make the firmware changes, it can be done, and you're not really upsetting your customers. Most of the time, they'll be very understanding. And even if you lose a few customers along the way because they're just mad at you, don't worry about it. On the internet, 100 customers is not going to make or break you. Your potential is billions of customers, so in the beginning, 100's no big deal. This is probably a subject I'll have to get into in another video, but it's not really where we're at yet about how the customer plays a role in the development and eventual sale of your products. So back to Gonzalo. So Gonzalo, make a mold that's just an insert and get that design down as cheap as you can and with the least number of parts inside the mold. The smaller the metal that you use in the mold making machine, the cheaper it's going to be. On your first run, make your mold out of aluminum and then go to steel on your second one if you need to start making large quantities. Aluminum molds will wear out quicker, but we don't care about that in the beginning. So aluminum molds are really your best choice, especially when your budget is low. So some injection molded parts have glass and fiber in them. This strengthens the part, but it also wears out the mold quicker. And you may have to go to steel in these cases, but it really depends on what your application is. You need to look at the cost of the initial run as a whole, not on a per piece basis. When we're talking about that initial run, we're trying to get our investment down as low as possible. I have talked about this in previous episodes where I have a line of products that's actually 30 electronic boards. By using the 100 piece rule, I got the initial run on each unit down to $1,000. But the entire product line is still going to cost me $30,000 to $50,000 because there's so many modules. Now imagine if I didn't use the 100-piece rule, what this series of products would have cost me to make. We would be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And even though I've been doing this a long time, I still use this rule because I need to minimize my risk. I'm not going to mortgage the house. I'm not going to sell a car. I'm not going to do anything to put me or my wife or my family in jeopardy. And you don't want to do that either. You know I must be doing something right when all the invention companies are starting to subscribe. I welcome you guys, and I hope you're going to leave some comments or maybe even post some rebuttal videos to prove me wrong. We all want to hear from you, but we want proof of success stories. We don't want to hear any kind of fluff. So I hope that this makes sense, that we're not really worried about profit in our initial run of 100. We just need to make sure that we know our price points ahead of time. And a little secret, I have gotten prices from Asia and other places, and there's not that much of a price break between 100, 250, 500, and even 1,000 pieces. You really don't get price breaks until you're talking about 10,000, 100,000, or 1,000,000 pieces. And that's beyond the scope of anything that we're talking about on this channel. Now, if you're lucky enough to get that successful, you won't even need to listen to me anymore. So I wish you luck and hope it happens to you. I hope the foundation for everything we've been talking about gets you onto that path where you're doing even better than I have ever done.